Barton. We're going to be asking each other questions, and after we've done that for about half an hour, we'll take questions from viewers. It sounds a little bit formal to say we're having an interview, but we'll certainly try and make it interesting and fun. Which is where I'll begin by saying to Rhiannon, it sounds like you've had an exciting summer, what with improving your Welsh and doing a little paddle boarding. What was it like?
Well, we've had a busy summer because my son just finished his A-levels, so we've kind of had a long summer. We wanted to make the most of it. We had Norfolk for a week, and then I went down to Wales for a week to do a Welsh language course, which was wonderful. I learned a ton of Welsh because basically it was, if you don't speak Welsh, we won't feed you. If you don't ask for your coffee and beer in Welsh, you won't get it. So
right.
Yeah, it's been a lovely summer, really nice. What about you, Angela? What have you been up to?
I've been spending lots of time with family, my twin granddaughters, which is wonderful. I've also been doing a lot of crafting, which I find very therapeutic. And I'm lucky enough to have a little craft room here. So yeah, I've been making lots of framed embroideries and some jewellery out of smashed china and what have you. So I know
you're very talented. I'm in awe of your beautiful collages. You write wonderful novels, and then you do these fabulous collages.
Thank you. I'm just an amateur, but I do enjoy it.
I think you do a really professional job. They're gorgeous.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Thank you.
Can I ask you a little bit about your books? Can we chat a little bit about
books? Of course, yes.
Yeah. You and I have known each other, I just realised, about 10 years. And when we first met, we were both aspiring writers. We both had manuscripts in our handbags, so to speak, and we were both seeking agents and publishers and chasing our dream. And actually, we've both, in our own different ways, got our books published and had a real, we've connected with readers. And I think for me, that's just been amazing. And to see each other's journeys as authors has been wonderful too. So you've got two contemporary novels that are out. I'd like to chat about those first. I'm not sure which one was written first. You've got Magnolia House and you've got My Number. So do you want to show us Magnolia House? You've got it behind you. Do you want to show people? Here's Magnolia House.
Yes.
And I'll just give a quick summary so people know what the book's about.
Okay.
Rowan, who's a lady, she thinks she has it all. She's got the perfect husband and her perfect life, but then her husband dies on the football pitch, which is a very sad thing and quite topical in the Nottinghamshire area at the moment.
Yes.
And she decides after that she has to open her house to housemates, to tenants. But when she opens her house, is she opening her heart? So that's the plot line loosely for Magnolia House. Then your second contemporary novel is You've Got My Number. Would you like to show? So here it is, very lovely. And it's, again, Tess, like Rowan in Magnolia House. She thinks she's got a perfect life. And then one day she realises that she's absolutely fed up with her immature boyfriend. And that's when things start to unravel. Your contemporary novels are amazing because they really have you really have your finger on the pulse of modern life and issues that kind of define our lives. So they're rooted in the issues of our time. It's all about relationships and sexuality and some mental health and addiction, and quite a lot of deceit and betrayal and people not being honest with each other. And above it all is what we're all looking for, I think, is to be happy. That's the overarching thing. So where do you get your inspiration from for these amazing books?
I think generally life. I think communication is underestimated, and I like to put lack of communication in my books. I think it's a vital part of survival, and is actually essential for survival, because misunderstanding, whether it's between countries or families or couples, it's essential. So I put lots of communication mistakes in my books, and I ask my characters to fix them. And I also like to give them lots of problems, both mental and physical. And by my characters working through their own problems helps me, because if I have issues, I'll download them to my characters and say, how are you going to deal with this? And it's almost as if they're helping me. I give them a problem like grief in Arlette's story and Magnolia House. It helped me a lot getting over my dad at the time when I was writing those, getting over my dad dying. And they almost showed me the way, if you like. And sadness at being let down by a loved one, I put that into You've Got My Number. And how Tess managed to deal with that also helped me. I used to have a very mild OCD with the number 3, which I gave to Daniel in You've Got My Number. Oh. And I thought, I've got, I really did give him all my, like I would think, right, I need to take the 3rd trolley from the supermarket. I need to pick the 3rd tin of beans up.
Oh, really? Gosh.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not something that anybody or any friends or anybody in public would notice.
No.
Luckily, it wasn't the number 33, or I'd have been in trouble. But it was the number 3. And I thought, look, Daniel, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you this problem. Try and work it out, and then I'll learn from that. And that's what I did. So I find it very therapeutic.
Did Daniel sort your problem? Are you still counting number 3?
I'm not.
You're not?
I'm not. No, and it was only in times of stress.
Yes.
But now I can say to myself, don't be ridiculous. Take trolley number 2, nothing's going to happen. It's a trolley. So yes, he did sort it for me.
Fantastic. Your plots are amazing. You have the most. The plots just drive us on, and that you have lots of twists and turns, and nobody quite knows. You just can't. How do you plot? How do you plot? Do you draw charts? Some writers draw. They have great spider charts on their walls. Or do you have it in your head? Or or do you have a piece of software? Some writers, even I've not used this, but apparently there's some software that allows you to plot. Or does it just all fizz in your mind and come together like that?
I'll be honest. I have a narrow framework. I know what the problems are I want to introduce, because there's always got to be obstacles for characters to get over and for them to grow as a character. And I've got a start off point, and I know I want to resolve everything by the end. But quite literally, my characters lead me. When I'm writing, it's a bit like watching a film in my head. And I'm trying to write to capture everything they're saying and what they're planning and what's coming next. So I don't have an A to Z plan of what's going to happen. I go off in tangents, and that's quite exciting sometimes, and surprises me sometimes where my characters take me.
Yeah. That I work in a pretty similar way, actually. I think I write stuff down on bits of paper and have spider charts on bits of paper, but yes. I don't really do it in the kind of meticulous pre-planned way that many writers do.
No.
Can I ask you about your French novels? Well, you've got one French novel. Yes. I love this French novel because
thank you.
I'm interested in historical fiction. I write historical fiction myself. You have one French novel that's published, and it's a World War II novel set in wartime France, and it's called Arlette's Story. Do you want to show us that? Have you got that?
Certainly. I love this cover.
I love it too, with the poppies. It's beautiful. Now, I'll just give you a quick summary, quick teaser, so that people know what the book's about. I suppose you'd say she's an ordinary French girl. She's a farm girl. She lives on a farm, and she's living through extraordinary times. And she initially hopes that when the Germans invade, they come in the north of France, and she's more southern based. So she's hoping that the war won't impact too much on her quiet country life, but she couldn't be more wrong. A Jewish refugee turns up, and that is kind of a kickoff for the story. So she realizes that the old life, the peaceful existence, is gone for good. So that's the plot line.
Yes.
Essentially, the flavour of it, shall we say. And you've got another one which is a work in progress, so I don't know how much, but we can come on to that.
Yeah.
You recreate beautifully life in wartime France. So you talk about the service de travail obligatoire, which is the forced
labor
that the Germans forced on men, particularly young men and working age. How do you do your research into recreating life in wartime France?
Initially, with Arlette's story, it was a holiday in France, and there was talk about this ghost village, which intrigued me. I had been hoping to write a Victorian novel, because there's a workhouse nearby where we live. So I knew I wanted to go into historical. So when I visited this ghost town, which is actually called Oradour-sur-Glane, it was so moving and so unexpected. So initially it was visiting the place. And just quickly, Oradour-sur-Glane was all the townspeople were massacred on the 10th of June 1944, with just seven survivors out of 646. So as well as visiting the place, I read novels of the World War II era, non-fiction books, watch films, World War II films and documentaries, and take notes while I'm watching them. There's fabulous People's War articles on the internet, where people who lived through that time have recorded what they saw. I've visited Oradour 4 times. I've visited Oradour Museum 3 times. Then there's internet, blogs, articles, old newspapers. I did speak to 2 French elderly citizens when I was there, and although there were children around that time, they had got lots of information, talking to their parents before their parents had died. So it was very interesting talking to them. And of course, archives as well. There's so much out there nowadays. We're so lucky to have the internet, aren't we?
We are. We're really lucky, really lucky. Yeah. I think it's revolutionised research for authors. I know when I was researching my first novel, that I spent a lot of time in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. This was kind of like early days of the internet, going through old maps and old papers and old books, but you can get most of this stuff, a lot of it online, not all of it, but you certainly can. And you can even, use Google Maps and drive along and things and see
it's things. Incredible, isn't it? It really is.
It is. I don't think it replaces the place of. I think you do need to go often to know places, but it certainly helps to have all this information at our fingertips. You talk about Oradour-sur-Glane, this horrendous massacre of French citizens in the last days of the war. Really,
yes.
We don't really know why the Germans did it. They seem to think it was in revenge for somebody, one of their own soldiers that was killed.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, nobody has actually got a definitive answer. Some people say the Germans thought that there were arms hidden there. and others say it was in retribution to the killing of a German soldier. And some say it was just they realised they were losing the war and were just showing that last little bit of power. But nobody knows the exact reason.
But it's a huge responsibility writing. I feel that when I'm writing my historical novels.
Absolutely.
The weight of responsibility on your shoulders to get it right and do justice to huge tragedies.
Absolutely.
How
you want to honour the dead's memory. You don't want to glamorise it, and you want to make it accurate. So there is a huge responsibility. Yes,
it is. I felt that particularly with my novels, that you didn't want to sensationalise it, but you wanted to tell it.
You wanted to tell the story. Yes.
Tell the story. Yeah. One more. Was it time to move on to me, and then we can come back to some other?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we've done quarter of an hour. Yes.
Yeah. Then we can come back to some other questions if we've got time at the end. Actually, Marilyn's got a question for you, but I think we might, Marilyn, keep that to the end, if that's all right. We'll come back to it. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Okay, so you also have written both contemporary and historical novels, haven't you? I'm going to start with The Last Viceroy, if you have that book there.
Yeah, here it is. It might need a bit of explanation because it's this is Lady Edwina Mountbatten, who was the wife of the last Viceroy of India, Lord Louis Mountbatten. And she went out to India in 1947 as the Viceroy, the wife of Louis Mountbatten, and they were transferring power from Britain to India. India was becoming independent, and she had a love affair with Pandit Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of independent India. So this is him. This is his in India, his head is very famous because he wore this kind of white hat. So the publishers put her mind in his mind, so that's his kind of profile there. So I thought it was rather, a rather clever job of that. Yeah.
Well, my question for that is, so it's spring 1947 when Lord and Lady Mountbatten arrive in New Delhi. The novel follows events that take place leading up to and following Indian independence and partition. So, Rhiannon, writing about actual historical events and real people, as we have said, the question you asked me, it carries a huge responsibility, and we need to tread a fine line between accuracy and not glamorizing the situation. One of the reviews of your book says that it's a tasteful welding of fiction and fact. Can you tell us a little bit about your research and how you strive for that authenticity?
Yeah, sorry, that's my phone pinging in the background. I thought I'd switched it all off, but it's still pinging. I started off as if I was doing the research, but I got the bug for writing about this love affair. So that wouldn't leave me alone. So that was the compulsion, this fascinating love affair between a white woman and an Indian man, people of middle age who ought to have been enemies, who were actually great friends, possibly lovers. And I read a lot of the books of the time, the histories, the biographies. Pandit Nehru writes most beautifully in English, so I read all his books. I then went down to the Mountbatten archives in Southampton University and looked at the papers that are available there. There's a lot of controversy about the Mountbatten papers because they were bought with public money, and some of them are being held back from public view. So that's the subject for a whole Zoom, is why is the British establishment holding back some of the papers? So I looked at some of the ones that were publicly available. I went to India and I visited the places, as many of the places where the key events took place, to soak up the atmosphere. And it wasn't till I'd done that I felt yeah, when I'd been to India and hung out in these places, I thought, yeah, I can write this now. But I was very careful to, essentially I was filling in the gaps. I knew the key figures, so there are real people in the novel. Obviously, they're real people, but it's told from the point of view of a female aide. Lady Mountbatten had female aides who went out with her from the UK. Now, all the chaps, and they were chaps in those days, left diaries and notes and papers. And guess what? The women didn't. The female aides did not leave papers. So there was my gap, to invent a character that was close to Lady Mountbatten. So she's not real, but she could have been, because there were female aides. And then I knew what was said in the meetings. So crucial meetings about the transfer of power between the key Indians and the British leaders, Lord Mountbatten. And I knew what the stresses were. So I imagined what was said outside the meetings, what was said in private, what the private conversations would be. And I knew that the Mountbatten's marriage was under huge stress, because people's diaries talked about them rowing at night, screaming rows in Viceroy's house. So it was about, I actually had a timeline where I knew where people were. The papers are so detailed that you can see who went in which car. They call them the arrangements for these events. And I suspect that the royal family runs on similar grounds today, and embassies, that you see who's going in whose car, and you see who's sitting next to whom at the seating plan. So you can literally see X was sitting next to Y. So you can think, well, what might they have talked about at that dinner? You know, and then you can fill in the gaps. So I had so much material that
it certainly sounds like it helps with the accuracy of things as
well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. Right, so I'll move on to The Woman Who Lost China, if you have that book there. It's 1949, and the communists gained control of mainland China and established the People's Republic of China. Your book follows 4 generations of the Manyings. So you've had to create a whole family of characters, and writers spend so much time in their characters' heads and lives that we build up a relationship with them. Which character from your books do you miss most keenly, and why?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I miss 2. I miss Pandit Nehru from The Woman Who Lost China, though he's a real person. He's a very, very interesting man. So I miss him, and I miss Man Ying, who was the female lead character in this book. She isn't my mother-in-law. I'm married to a man who comes from Hong Kong originally, so she isn't my mother-in-law, but she is the story. Some of the key events in the story were based on some of the things that happened to my mother-in-law. She's over 100 now, my mother-in-law.
Wow.
But she lived through wartime China. She fled to Hong Kong in 1949 when the communists took over. She fled, she was locked in the toilet compartment of a train with her newborn baby and a revolver, and told not to come out till she got over the border into Hong Kong.
Wow.
There's all sorts of stories, like family legends in a sense. A legend about an ancestor who committed ritual suicide in order to try and get the emperor to change his policies, essentially, to achieve justice.
Yeah.
So that's in there. So Man Ying's journey, I think, she's a child in the book, and she journeys to be an old woman through the story. I think she's probably...
That's some incredible first-hand accounts there then.
Yeah.
Wonderful. The Dream That Held Us. Absolutely love this book. This is a more contemporary novel than your previous 2, set in the 80s, 1980s. It's a story of second chances and reconnection. I love this book and enjoyed reading about the relationship between 2 middle-aged characters. After all, the need for love and loving someone else doesn't end when we reach a certain age, does it? So
no, it doesn't.
where did you find your inspiration for writing The Dream That Happens?
This one, the other two, The Woman Who Lost China and The Last Bystream, were big historical epics, if you want, a lot of research. This one, although it's not personal in a sense, it is about my generation of people. I'm a 1980s girl. I was at university in the 1980s at Oxford, and all my life I've felt very keenly that, well, it was awkward. I was a northern girl in Oxford in the 1980s, and it was very odd time because everybody was all fired up with Thatcherism and Reaganism and, you know, get out there and get rich quick and make a load of money. And yes, coming from my background, I found that a very strange environment. And then I saw that this kind of mad desire, capitalist desire that we started with Thatcherism and Reaganism, ended with the financial crash, the last financial crash. And then the atmosphere's changed. We're talking much more now about sustainability and moral responsibility in business and this sort of thing. So I wanted to write a story about the 1980s generation and the kind of people that they were, the people that the pressures that were on young people and the expectations and the atmosphere of the time. So I started with 1980s Oxford, which is an atmosphere I knew. And then I pushed these people into middle age because what I was seeing at the time of the financial crash all around me was my contemporaries, not necessarily who'd been at Oxford, but people of my age, middle-aged people, who were being made redundant, sort of being cut off at the knees with a chainsaw because the businesses were going bust and the men in particular weren't getting re-employed. Mm-hmm. And middle age, it's a cliche middle-age crisis. People have been married for 20 years, maybe 15, 20 years. Kids are growing up. People start to re-question what they want in life. So I invented these two people that had known each other as young people and then met again later in life as middle-aged people. And they had loved each other. And I think they still did love each other, but could it and would it and should it work?
You could feel it bubbling underneath the, you know, in the background. It was fabulous. Yeah.
I was playing with that idea of middle age and love in middle age, love in later life, which interests me a lot as a novelist. You know, romance, if we want to call it that, loving relationships is not something just reserved for the young people.
No, and I've not read too many novels that do include middle age to, you know, late middle age romances. So it was very refreshing. Yeah. Very refreshing.
And then, you know, is the answer, as somebody that's perhaps having a midlife crisis, people re-questioning where they are sort of 25 years on after them finishing university or college or getting their first job and wondering, well, heck, what's it all about? You know, I've done the right thing. I've jumped through all the hoops. So I was really interested. Is the answer to find somebody? Well, I'm not going to answer the question. You have to read the book. Yeah. Is the answer to your problems just to find somebody else? It's the Mr. or Mrs. Right. Is that the answer to our questions? Romantic novels will tell us that it is, but is that really the answer to their questions? So,
fabulous question. Yes, the readers will have to sort of work that out, won't they?
Yeah.
Shall we take a few questions from you?
Can I read the first one?
Yes, of course.
From Marilyn, which is addressed to you, Angela. She says, Angela, are you a superstitious person? Number 3 was of concern to you. How about number 13? Do you hide under the duvet on Friday the 13th?
No, I'm not suspicious at all. Friday the 13th doesn't bother me one way or the other. In fact, if you ask family or friends, I've been known to purposely walk under a ladder on Friday the 13th because I've thought It's a ladder, it's a number. So no, I've not got some psychological problem with numbers or with suspicion. Just, I was born on the 3rd of September. So number 3 has always been a lucky number, which is, to me, that sounds suspicious, doesn't it? Like like I've got, like it's a superstition, but it's just been like a lucky number. So no other superstitions, which is probably why in times of stress, I used the number 3 to calm myself and make myself feel like everything was safe, but not overall.
3 is a magic number. It is a magic number.
They've made songs about it. 3's the magic number, haven't they? So
and in religion and religions and things, you know, so things always come in 3s in traditional religions, and everything comes in 3s. I think it's because it's an odd number, so you can change the possibilities around. Maybe, I don't know, that's a discussion.
Interesting.
Francis asks, what about love in old age? Yes, Francis, absolutely. Francis. Love in old age. I've written about love in middle age because I suppose, like Angela, that's what I was seeing, experiencing and seeing around me, people getting divorced and remarried and re-falling in love. But certainly, absolutely, and in my book, there's, to my mind, there's not enough about the different forms of love that people experience at different stages in their lives. One of the interesting things about this novel, to me, was she was in her late 50s, he was in his 60s, and people say they didn't have a physical relationship, they were just great friends, spiritual friends. Well, I don't buy that, but you know, if somebody wants to write a novel about love in middle age, I'll be the first one to love in old age. I'll be the first one to read it.
Absolutely. Let me read a question from Fran Hill. Thank you, Fran. Do you both create detailed character profiles for your characters before you start writing, or do you make them up as you go along? If I just answer that first, I suppose I do. Everything from the colour of their eyes to the way they like to dress to their thoughts on life in general. So I suppose I do, and it's a bit like Rhiannon who said a spider graph, because you have to keep your characters consistent. You can't have them being afraid of something and then further down in the novel you know, they're faced with that and they're absolutely fine with it. So they do have to have this continuity of character. So for me, yes, I do write quite a profile on each character. How about you, Rhiannon?
I do. I tend to try and keep it to like a side or two of A4, like bullet points. So I imagine it in my mind, and then I think about it in a more rational way and try and put it down. And it can change as the novel evolves, but I do think them out, and I do think about, in the one that I'm working on now, they've both got excuse me, both got backstories, so I've had to be very quite interesting backstories that influence the present, the novel itself. So I've had to be very clear about what their backstories are that make them the people that they are. So in that case, yeah, and similarly with Edwina Mountbatten, very, very complex character. I had to look at her childhood, to the kind of experiences she had as a child, and her kind of, she was very rich, her kind of social background, to try and understand what made her tick. So I do that, but it might not be like some authors. It might be very messy, but in bullet points. But I know what I'm doing.
You know what. That's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love Francis's comment. I'll get on to it. That's about love at middle age. So
yeah. Well,
Francis.
Yeah. Oh, this is a good one from Fran. Yeah, no, is it Celia says that she'll get onto it, Fran?
Yes.
Okay. Well, when it's written, you'll have to get in touch with me, because I would love to read it.
I think she's thinking about love herself, maybe. Writing it.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Get onto it. Absolutely. Yeah. How do you think you have changed as writers since you first started? This is a good one. And what do you think you wish you'd known back then? Wow, that's a good one. So 2 parts. Can you see it, Angela?
I can see it, yes.
You want to take the first part and then the second part?
Yes. How do I think I've changed? I think I was very naive when I first started when it came to writing. I thought it was writing a book, writing a story in your head, perhaps reading over it once or twice for a few spelling mistakes and sending it off. But boy, was I wrong. There's a definite learning process, not only how to lay it out, but the editing process is, very involved. And so I've learned how to write a book, but nobody teaches you how to write a bestseller. So you have to accept limitations as they come. But I think I've also, having given problems to characters and made friends with them, basically, I definitely think I've grown as a person and a writer in the years I've been writing, and I do feel it's a form of therapy, and it's my go-to safe place. So I feel I'm a calmer, less stressed person because of it. Do you want to answer the second part of that, or feel free to answer first? What do you wish you'd known back then that you know now?
Oh, everything.
Yes.
I wish I'd known about the industry in more detail. I experience problems now as a writer because I have a degree in Chinese. I speak Chinese, I speak Mandarin. I've lived in that part of the world. My husband is from Hong Kong. So I write Chinese characters. But I'm being told that I can't write Chinese characters anymore by the industry because I'm not ethnic Chinese. So I wish I had known about how nasty the industry can be and how politically correct, this tyranny of politically correctness. Personally, my perspective on that is I cannot write an own story totally from the point of view of, like, I couldn't write a story about being a Chinese immigrant to the UK totally from that point of view of that Chinese immigrant. That's an own story that I couldn't write because I don't have that experience. But what I can do, and I believe I'm competent to do, is incorporate Chinese characters into my novel. But the way the industry is going at the moment, it's essentially saying you can only write what is your own ethnicity and your own sexuality. And I don't agree with that position. So I wish I'd known more about the political correctness in the industry. I wish I'd known more about the financial margins in the industry and how the economics stacks up, because it doesn't for most writers.
Oh, no, not at all. No, you don't write to get rich, do you, Rhiannon?
No, you write. I write like you do. I write because it's my way of relating to the world. Yeah. I often say to people, I'm a writer who wishes she could paint. I was rubbish at art at school. I can't paint. So my way of expressing myself is through words. The woman, I'll just say this and I'll finish. The Woman Who Lost China was my way of, I'd been working with, around, studying, working in, living, loving in the Chinese world for 25 years when I wrote The Woman Who Lost China. So a bit like your therapy books. I wouldn't say it was therapy, but it was my way of coming to terms with everything and everyone that I had experienced. Chinese history, the kind of people, the kind of tragedy, the horror of what happened in China at various points. My way of coming to terms and expressing all that.
That's fabulous.
We only have 5 minutes left. I think
Have you got time just to quickly tell us about your writing day, your favorite, where you write and what time you write?
Oh, well, I used to be very, coming back to number 3, very obsessive compulsive sort of thing. I used to be very driven. When my son was little, I had to be, get him to nursery, come home, sit down, get on with it in that little 3-hour slot that I had. And I'm a morning person, so my default time for writing, for actually inputting, is in the morning. Although I'm creating, I often come up with my best ideas in the bath. I'm becoming a bit more mellow in my old age, a bit less driven. So my deadlines are slipping. Yeah.
Fabulous.
What about you? What's your writing routine, writing day?
Oh, usually it was just something that I felt compelled to do. It didn't matter what time of day it was, when I had some free minutes, I went there. But without going into anything, it's been a really tough year, and I haven't written for about a year, but I do hope to get back into it and be in the headspace where I can use it as a sort of therapy again. So
I'm sure you will, and
thank you.
we've both had difficult years in one way and
we
the
have.
other. I haven't. I'm hoping that I have written, but not that well. So I've had a bit of a break over the summer. I'm hoping when the autumn comes, I'll settle down and finish off the work in progress.
Let's hope we both do, yeah. So
I think writers you can't output successfully all the time. You need rest time, reflection time. I really do believe in that you can't. Some people can, but I've had 20 years of writing, and you can't keep pumping it out, I don't think.
No.
You need. So.
We better bring it to an end there. Thank you so much for your questions and for joining us. And thank you, Rhiannon, for your interesting answers. And it's lovely to see you again. And I love the top you chose.
You don't want to see what's underneath. It's my job.
Oh, well, I hope we can catch up soon for a coffee. And thank you to everybody who joined us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.